As the former owner of a chain of business-to-business magazines, and then later on I owned a weekly newspaper, one thing that I'm most grateful for is the opportunity that I had to sit down with literally hundreds of business owners. And over the years, I sat down with them and I learned their stories. I learned how they started their business, how they built their business, how they took their business to the next level. I learned about some of the pitfalls that they had. I learned about some of the problems or hurdles that they had to overcome just to stay in business. But one thing that I always found fascinating is when I would listen and hear about how they started their business. And many of them started their business by buying another business. And some of the lessons that I learned from listening to them, I'm going to share with you in this video. I'm going to tell you how to buy a small business in 2022. And specifically, I'll give you 11 things that I want you to watch out for, things that you really should be looking at if you are real serious about buying that business. At the end, after I give you the 11, I'm going to tell you 2 things that I think are hidden opportunities that if this business that you're looking at buying, if that business has these 2 things, or what I call hidden assets, well, you know what? I think you've hit the mother lode. So I'm going to tell you about those 2 things. I'll tell you about the 11 things that you have to watch out for. And then at the end, what I like to do is I like to sum this all up for you. And I'm going to give it all to you. That's up next, right here on Side Hustle Rules. Come on! Welcome back to Side Hustle Rules. My name is Lou Reyes, and today we're going to be talking about how to buy a small business in 2022. But before I do that, what I want to ask you to do is to subscribe to Side Hustle Rules. And after you subscribe to the channel, what you're going to want to do, or I'm going to ask you to do anyway, is to go ahead and hit that little notification bell, because when you do that, every time I upload a new video, you'll be notified in your inbox. The other thing that you may want to consider doing is I do have in the description box a link to my free Side Hustle Starter Kit. Go ahead, get that kit. It'll help you. It'll give you the first 8 steps, the basic steps to starting a small business. And I think it's a big help. I put that together, put a lot of information in there for you, and I know it can be a help if you are looking at starting a small business. So let's get to how to buy a small business in 2022. Number 1, will this be an asset sale or a share sale? Now, the difference is this. If you're buying it as a share sale, what you're doing is you're buying the seller's stock. You're purchasing their stock directly from them, and you are going to obtain ownership in that company and that legal entity. But when you buy that, you're buying the assets and you're also buying the liabilities. Now, if I'm buying it as a share sale, what I'm going to do is, yes, I'll buy the assets and I'll get the liabilities if there are some, and usually there are going to be some. But what I would also do is I would make sure that I sign, or that we sign, me and that seller, that we sign an agreement that says these are the liabilities, this is it, there are no other liabilities, because I don't want something coming up later on down the road and now I learned that there is a liability that he wasn't or she wasn't telling me about. So yeah, when you buy it, you decide, number 1, you decide is this an asset sale or a share sale. If it's an asset sale, you're just buying the assets and that's it. You're leaving that business owner, the person that you're making the purchase from, you're leaving them with everything else. Number 2, I'm going to want to see 3 years of financials, and preferably these are financials that were prepared by a CPA. And I also want to know how much debt they have. And I want to know what that debt was used for. And what I'm doing anyway, I'm looking at debt ratio, and I want to know whether or not they have a debt ratio that is considered good, which depends, of course, on the context. If this company's in the industrial sector, well, you know what that means? They could have a little bit more debt, or maybe the interest rates are going to be affecting that. You determine the debt ratio by calculating the liabilities divided by the assets. Now, the debt ratio can be used to kind of let you know what the health of the business is. I don't want to say kind of. It lets you know about the health of the business, but you really are looking at the debts. You're looking at the debt ratio. You want to make sure that you've examined closely the major financial statements. I think the debt ratio, that's important to me. A smaller company, they may not have a debt ratio, but a debt ratio between 0.3 and 0.6 From a risk perspective, I think debt ratios of 0.4 or maybe lower are considered better. A debt ratio of 0.6 or higher, well, it makes it more difficult to borrow money. So I really want to look at the debt ratio, and I just gave you some of the percentages that I'm looking at. And again, it just really depends on the sector, but it also, if you're buying a real small business, well, that debt ratio isn't as important. It's just a flat out amount of dollars that they have in debt. Number 3, I'm going to be looking at accounts receivable. I want to know what the accounts receivable are in terms of the dollar amount. I want to know who has been collecting them. And I'll tell you this, when I'm looking at accounts receivable, if they tell me that this is how much that we have on our books, this is our AR, well, I'm always going to discount that a certain percentage. And I'm going to discount it because I'm going to assume that there is going to be a percentage of AR that is not going to be collectible. They could come back, and they probably will come back and go and tell you, no, this is all collectible, but you know what? I'm always going to err on the side of caution. I'm going to give it a discount. But yeah, you want to find out about the AR. Another thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to examine sales, and I'm going to call this number 4. I want to know where the sales are coming from, how often the sales are coming in, and I want to know how many customers are generating those sales. I don't want sales concentrated in a very few accounts, because if you lose one of those customers, well, then you've got a problem. And speaking of sales, I want to know how much the owner is contributing to the sales, because sometimes what I find is if you have an owner who is very active in that business, why that owner is usually bringing in the lion's share of sales. And when that owner leaves, well, are these customers going to stay with you? Are they still going to stay with the business, or are they going to go find someone else? Because after all, they have no loyalty to you. You're buying that business. So yeah, you want to find out how much of the sales coming in is from that owner. Now, the other thing, and I'm going to call this number 6, is if you have an owner, you are going to want a non-compete agreement with that owner and also key employees at that company. Now, if they balk at doing that, and you're in the initial stages of negotiation and they balk at doing that, at least the owner says, no, I'm not going to sign a non-compete. Well, you just walk away, because the writing is on the wall. They want to compete with you. They want to cash in. They're going to compete with some of the money or all the money that they make from you. The other thing I recommend is get a non-compete, or ask for a non-compete from key employees. Because if you have an employee or 2 or 3 that is key at that company, they know what's going on. They may have access to the customer list. They may bring in all the sales. Well, you know what? You want a non-compete from them. I do not know a single business owner that I have spoken to, and I mentioned in the opening of this video, I don't know a single business owner that would tell you, oh, you don't have to do that, because they're going to tell you, do that. That is so important. Protect yourself. Number 7, regarding employees, you know what? I would spend some time talking to employees. If they've got 1 or 2, it won't be that difficult, or isn't that difficult to do. If they've got more than that, I still would try to spend some time with an employee or 2. You're always going to find an employee who will open their mouth, who will tell you something that they probably shouldn't be telling you, or maybe what they're going to tell you is all good things. And either way, you're going to learn a lot. Now, I'd also want to ask the owner of the company about his or her turnover rate there. Now, obviously, some companies, some businesses are going to have a higher turnover rate. You can expect that. If it's in retail or restaurants, yeah, I'm thinking that their turnover rate's going to be higher. But if it's in another kind of a company that is maybe like an accounting firm or maybe some kind of a design firm, well, I wouldn't expect a high turnover rate. But either way, spend time with the employees. This would be number 8. Check online reviews, and that's not difficult to do whatsoever. You can spend an hour online checking out reviews of the company, and that is something that once I check a review or 2, if there's a person that I can contact after doing that review, you know what, I'm gonna contact them if it makes sense to do that. But either way, really want to spend time, and I'd spend no less than an hour checking online reviews. Now, maybe it's a smaller business, and yeah, maybe it's a real small business. You don't need to spend an hour, but check online reviews. Also check their Facebook page, check their Twitter page, see what kind of posts that they're making, but really do your due diligence. Number 9 is this. If I am looking at purchasing a retail business, you can bet I am going to go to City Hall of that suburb, wherever it's at, but I'm going to City Hall. I'm going to find out if they have any knowledge of another business, a similar business that has recently decided that they're going to open up. Maybe they bought a permit or whatever, but I'm going to go ahead and find out if there's any other businesses of that type that are opening up in that neighborhood. And again, if it's a retail business, that's certainly something that you got to do, you want to do, and it's easy to check. Number 10, talk to the landlord. If you're buying a business that, again, it's a brick and mortar, it's got a retail location, or maybe it's even an office, well, you know what? Talk to the landlord. And I would do a couple different things when I talk to that landlord. Number one, I'm going to want to look at the lease. How much time is left on the lease? How much debt? I'm going to want to find that out. When I say debt, by the way, let me make sure I'm clear on that. Are they paying their rent on time? What is or how would the landlord rate their rent payments? If the person that you're buying the business from, if they've been late every single month, well, you know what? That's obviously a red flag. But yeah, talk to the landlord. Check to make sure that you understand the lease. You don't want to get into something that you really don't want to get into. But be absolutely sure that you find out if they're making their payments on time. Number 11, check their permits or check their licensing. In some businesses, yes, they are required to have permits or licensing, and I would look at those physical. If it's a piece of paper, I want to look at it. But here's what else that Mr. Lou is going to do is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to check with City Hall or some licensing bureau because I just want to cover my bases. I want to make sure that what I'm looking at is valid. And some of you may say, well, Lou, if you don't trust that person at that point, then you should just walk away. And no, I'm going to say, yeah, I trust him. But as the old saying goes, trust but verify. Well, there you go, folks. I just gave you 11 things that I'd like you to look at before you sign on the dotted line, before you buy that business. I want you to examine or suggest that you examine at least the 11 things that I mentioned. So now let's get to what I think you may have been waiting for. Let's get to what I call the hidden opportunities or the hidden assets. And that first asset is this. Do they have a mailing list? And if they have a mailing list, how many people are on that list? How up to date is that list? And when was the last time they updated that list? And I bring this up in 2022. You would be surprised how many businesses still don't have a mailing list, which is so much of the value of that business. If that business has 10 people on it or 10,000 people on it or 50,000 or more, that's a huge asset that you can use to generate money. Now, if they don't have a mailing list and you want to buy that business, well, accumulating the names, building that mailing list over time is a way for you not only to connect with that customer or potential customer, but it's also a way for you to generate extra income or additional income or creating a revenue stream because you can monetize that list. And if you're in business for 1 year or 5 years or 10 years or more, to not have a mailing list, why, it is a sin. The other hidden asset or hidden, I'm going to call it opportunity, is website traffic. Now, some businesses won't spend, or I want to say almost many businesses don't spend enough time on their website as they should. And in particular, what I'm really talking about is smaller businesses. And I get it, you're busy, you don't have a lot of time. But that website, just like your mailing list, is an asset and it's a way for you to make money. Now, the other thing is this. With a website, yeah, you can sell products on there, but you can also, if you've got traffic, you can run ads on your website. And that's another way to generate key revenue to help you not only to stay in business, but to fund any expansion or maybe to fund a vacation, however you want to use that money. But look at those two things. And even if they don't have what I would say are a robust website or a thorough mailing list, if you can turn that around, well, hey, that is a hidden asset and it's a way for you to generate extra money. Well, there you go, folks. I've just shared with you 11 things that I know you should be looking at if you're serious about purchasing, about buying a small business in 2022. I also shared a couple of things with you, which I call hidden opportunities or hidden assets that I think could help you to generate more money. So let me just sum this up, and I'll do this very quickly. At the end of the day, if you've done everything that I've mentioned, what I've learned over the course of years from many other people, including my own personal experience in business, if you do all these things, it's still up to you to make the decision, to make that decision to buy the business. But I would just caution you, and I would just give you one more little tip. If you're going to buy that business, and if you intend to be active, make sure that it is something that you really want to do. There is nothing worse than getting into a business because you got to get into it. You're buying that business just because you want to be in business. You need some money, so you kind of jump into it. Don't jump into it, my friend. Well, that's all I got for you. I will ask you a couple more things. As I said in the beginning, please, if you would, I'm going to ask you to consider subscribing to Side Hustle Rules. And I also mentioned to you that we do have a Side Hustle Starter Kit. There's a link to that in the description box. If you want to start a business, if you want to start one from scratch, I would go ahead or suggest going ahead and getting the free Side Hustle Starter Kit. You can click on the link in the description box. Well, that's all I got for you today, folks. As I always say, and I'm going to say it again, have a great day, everybody.